Most people think the solution to emotional situations is to stay calm, so they lower their voice, they stiffen their face, they suppress their reactions. And somehow everything gets worse. Because what emotional people don't need is a calm performance. They need emotional stability. There's a difference. When someone is emotional, their nervous system is overwhelmed. They're not operating from logic, they're operating from threat, fear, hurt, or frustration, and when you respond with forced calm, what they often hear is, "You're too much, your feelings are a problem. I'm above this and you're not." That tone, even when quiet, creates distance. Here's the truth no one teaches: you don't de-escalate emotion with control, you de-escalate it with regulation. Regulation means your body is grounded, your voice is steady, not tight, your energy is open, not armored. You're not trying to win, you're not trying to fix, you're not trying to prove how reasonable you are. You're trying to make the moment feel safe again. Because emotion doesn't calm down when it's challenged. It calms down when it's met. That doesn't mean you agree. It means you acknowledge the experience. Simple phrases do more than perfect logic ever wills. "I can see how upset you are. This clearly matters to you. I'm here." We can slow this down. Those words tell the nervous system, you're not alone in this moment. And once someone feels less alone, they start calming themselves. Most people make one fatal mistake with emotional people. They go straight to solutions. Just relax. You're overreacting. It's not that big of a deal. Here's what you should do. Every one of those increases intensity. Why? Because advice feels like dismissal when someone is overwhelmed. What they need first is containment. Containment means you can bring all of this here. I'm not running. I'm not attacking. I'm not minimizing you. That safety alone drops the emotional temperature. Another mistake people make is staying calm on the surface while boiling underneath. Your words say, "I'm fine." Your body says, "I'm irritated and judging you." People don't respond to your words. They respond to your nervous system. If your calm is fake, they'll feel it, and their body will escalate to match yours. Real stability starts inside your body. Slow your breathing. Unclench your jaw. Lower your shoulders. Soften your eyes. Your body is speaking before your mouth ever does. When you show grounded presence, their nervous system borrows your calm. That's co-regulation. And it's how humans have soothed each other for thousands of years. Now here's the part that gives you power. You are not responsible for fixing their emotions, but you are responsible for not making them worse. You don't need to absorb their chaos. You need to stay anchored while standing near it. That's strength. You can say, "I want to understand, but I can't do this while we're both escalated. I'm not leaving this conversation. I just need us to slow down. I care about what you're saying. I just need a calmer tone to hear it." That sets boundaries without abandoning connection. And notice this. You're not telling them to calm down. You're inviting the moment to calm down. That shift changes everything. The goal isn't to be calm. The goal is to be steady. Calm can feel cold. Steady feels safe. Calm can feel superior. Steady feels present. Calm can feel like withdrawal. Steady feels like support. When you stop trying to look calm and start trying to be stable, people feel it. And emotional people soften when they feel held, not handled. So the next time someone is emotional around you, don't tighten up. Open up. Ground your body, lower your pace, validate the experience. Delay solutions, hold your boundary with warmth. That's real power. Because the person who can stay emotionally steady in the presence of chaos becomes the emotional leader in the room. And that kind of leadership changes everything. Forcing calm often makes emotional situations worse, not better, even though it feels like the mature and responsible thing to do. Most people are taught that when emotions rise, the correct response is to lower your voice, stiffen your expression, and suppress whatever you're feeling. On the surface, this looks like self-control. In reality, it often creates emotional distance, misunderstanding, and escalation. What people experience in those moments is not calm energy, but emotional withdrawal disguised as composure. When someone is emotional, their nervous system is activated. They are operating from hurt, fear, frustration, or overwhelm, not logic. In that state, they are scanning the environment for safety. They are unconsciously asking one question: am I alone in this feeling, or is someone with me in it? When you force calm, your tone may become flat, your face tight, your body rigid. Even if your words are polite, your emotional availability drops. The other person doesn't feel supported, they feel judged, dismissed, or abandoned. Their nervous system reads your forced calm as disapproval or superiority, and their emotional intensity increases to try to be seen and felt. This is why telling someone to calm down almost never works. It doesn't regulate emotion, it invalidates it. It sends the message that their feelings are inconvenient or excessive. Even if that isn't your intention, the impact is the same. The emotional person now feels misunderstood on top of already being overwhelmed. Their emotions spike not because they want conflict, but because their experience is being minimized. Forcing calm also disconnects you from your own emotions. When you suppress irritation, fear, or discomfort to appear composed, your body still holds that tension. Your jaw tightens, your shoulders rise, your breathing becomes shallow. Your voice sounds controlled instead of grounded. People are incredibly sensitive to this mismatch between words and body language. They don't respond to what you say, they respond to what your nervous system is broadcasting. If your calm is fake, their body feels unsafe, and they escalate to match your hidden tension. Another problem with forced calm is that it shifts the interaction into a power struggle. When one person presents themselves as calm and rational while the other is emotional, an unspoken hierarchy forms. The calm person becomes the reasonable one, and the emotional person becomes the problem. This dynamic creates shame. Shame does not calm people down, it makes them louder, more defensive, or more withdrawn. What looks like emotional maturity becomes emotional invalidation. True de-escalation doesn't come from control, it comes from regulation. Regulation means your body is actually settled, not just your voice. It means you are present, open, and emotionally available. Your tone is steady, not tight. Your pace is slow, not clipped. Your eyes are soft, not guarded. This kind of grounded presence communicates safety. It tells the other person, you are not alone in this moment. I can handle your feelings without rejecting you. This is why validation works better than logic in emotional moments. Simple statements like, I can see how upset you are, or this really matters to you, lower intensity faster than perfect arguments ever will. These phrases don't mean you agree. They mean you recognize the emotional reality of the other person. That recognition alone soothes the nervous system. Once someone feels seen, their emotions begin to settle on their own. Forcing calm also leads people to jump into solutions too quickly. Advice, logic, and problem-solving feel helpful, but to an overwhelmed person, they feel like dismissal. The message they hear is, your feelings are in the way. Let's fix this so you can stop feeling. That makes them cling harder to their emotions to prove they are real and justified. Emotional intensity is often just a demand for acknowledgement, not a demand for solutions. There is also a hidden cost to always forcing calm resentment. When you repeatedly suppress your own reactions to look composed, you don't actually process your feelings. They accumulate, you become colder, sharper, and more distant over time. Eventually, the calm mask cracks, and all the stored frustration comes out in one moment that shocks everyone. What looked like patience was actually emotional avoidance. The goal in emotional situations is not to be calm, it is to be steady. Calm can feel cold. Steady feels safe. Calm can feel superior. Steady feels present. Calm can feel like withdrawal. Steady feels like support. Steadiness comes from grounding your body, slowing your breath, softening your posture, and staying emotionally available without absorbing the chaos. When you stop forcing calm and start offering grounded presence, emotional people change. They don't feel handled or judged. They feel met. And when people feel met, their nervous systems begin to regulate. The room gets quieter not because someone dominated the moment, but because safety returned. That is real emotional leadership. Emotional people need regulation, not correction, even though our instinct in tense moments is to fix, explain, or point out what they're doing wrong. When someone is overwhelmed by emotion, their nervous system is in a state of activation. Logic is offline. Perspective is narrowed. Their body is prioritizing survival over reason. In that state, correction doesn't soothe them, it threatens them. It tells their nervous system that they are unsafe, misunderstood, or about to be judged. What they need first is not to be taught a lesson or given a better argument. What they need is to feel anchored back into safety. Most conflicts escalate not because people are evil or irrational, but because one dysregulated nervous system collides with another. One person gets emotional. The other responds with criticism, logic, or emotional distance. The first person feels even more alone in their emotional state, so they intensify their feelings to be seen. The second person experiences that intensity as unreasonable behavior and corrects harder. Now both nervous systems are escalating each other. This loop continues until someone shuts down or explodes. Correction feels productive, but it rarely works in emotional moments. Saying things like, "You're overreacting," "That's not what I meant," or "You're being irrational," might be factually accurate, but emotionally destructive. These statements invalidate the other person's experience. They communicate that their feelings are wrong, excessive, or inconvenient. The person doesn't calm down. They either get louder to defend their reality or go quiet to protect themselves. Either way, emotional safety is gone. Regulation, on the other hand, speaks directly to the nervous system. It says, "You are not alone. You are safe here. I can handle your emotions without rejecting you." This message is transmitted less through words and more through tone, posture, pacing, and presence. A slow voice, relaxed shoulders, steady eye contact, and patient silence all tell the other person's body that there is no immediate threat. Once their nervous system begins to settle, their ability to think clearly returns. This is why validation is so powerful. Validation doesn't mean agreement, it means recognition. Saying, "I can see how hurt you are," or "This really upset you," does not mean the other person is right. It means their emotional experience is real. That recognition alone can drop emotional intensity by half. The person no longer has to fight to prove that their feelings make sense. They feel seen. People often resist regulation because it feels like rewarding bad behavior. They worry that if they validate emotions, they are encouraging drama, manipulation, or disrespect. But emotions are not behaviors. You can validate feelings while still holding boundaries about behavior. You can say, "I understand you're angry, and I'm not okay with being spoken to like that." That combination regulates while still protecting your self-respect. Another reason correction fails is timing. Even the best feedback delivered to a dysregulated person will be received as an attack. Their brain is not in learning mode, it's in defense mode. Trying to correct someone mid-emotion is like trying to teach swimming while they're drowning. You don't need to explain technique. You need to keep their head above water first. Regulation also means managing your own nervous system. If you are tense, irritated, or afraid, your body is broadcasting danger signals even if your words are polite. The other person's nervous system picks up on that instantly. You cannot regulate someone else while you are dysregulated yourself. Your calm has to be real, not forced. That means slowing your breathing, softening your body, and letting go of the need to win or be right in that moment. When you respond with regulation instead of correction, something surprising happens. The emotional person often becomes reasonable on their own. They don't need you to tell them they're overreacting. Once their nervous system settles, they usually realize it themselves. They may even apologize or soften their tone without being asked. This isn't because you controlled them. It's because you gave their body the conditions it needed to return to balance. Correction has its place, but only after regulation. Once emotions have settled, then perspective, accountability, and problem solving can happen productively. Then someone can hear, "Here's what hurt me," or "Here's what I need from you next time," without feeling attacked. Before that point, correction is just emotional gasoline on a fire. There is also a deeper layer to this. Many people grew up in environments where emotions were punished, mocked, or ignored. For them, being emotional already feels dangerous. When you correct them while they're emotional, you reinforce their core fear. My feelings are too much, I am too much. That wound doesn't heal through logic. It heals through repeated experiences of emotional safety. Regulation is not weakness, it is emotional leadership. It takes strength to stay grounded when someone else is intense. It takes maturity to prioritize connection over control. It takes courage to slow down instead of escalating. Anyone can criticize an emotional person. Very few can stabilize the emotional field of a room. When you choose regulation over correction, you stop fighting emotions and start guiding them back to safety. You stop trying to control people and start creating conditions where they can self-regulate. And in those moments, real influence happens, not through force or logic, but through grounded presence. Your presence matters more than your logic, especially in moments of emotional tension, even though most people believe the opposite. We grow up being taught that if we can just explain ourselves clearly enough, argue convincingly enough, or present the right facts, conflict will resolve itself. But real human interaction doesn't work like a courtroom. People don't calm down because your reasoning is flawless. They calm down because their nervous system feels safe in your presence. Before anyone can hear your logic, their body has to believe they are not under threat. In emotionally charged situations, the brain shifts into survival mode. The part responsible for reasoning and perspective taking goes quiet, while the part responsible for detecting danger takes control. This is why someone who is upset cannot simply calm down because you told them to. Their system is not responding to words, it is responding to tone, facial expression, posture, pacing, and energy. If your body is tense, your jaw is tight, your voice is sharp, or your eyes are hard, your logic will never land no matter how correct it is. Their nervous system will interpret your presence as hostile or dismissive, and everything you say will be filtered through that sense of threat. This is why two people can say the exact same sentence and get completely different results. One person says, "Let's talk about this," and it escalates the argument. Another person says, "Let's talk about this," and the room softens. The words are identical. The difference is presence. One carries urgency, irritation, or superiority in their tone and body. The other carries steadiness, patience, and openness. The nervous system of the other person reacts to that presence first, not to the content of the sentence. Presence is the emotional environment you create just by being in the room. It's the unspoken message your body sends before your mouth opens. It tells people whether you are safe or dangerous, receptive or defensive, grounded or reactive. People trust presence more than language because presence is harder to fake. You can lie with words. You cannot lie with your nervous system. This is why trying to sound calm rarely works if you are not actually calm. Forced calm has a tightness to it. It sounds controlled but not grounded. The other person can feel that you are holding something back, bracing yourself, or suppressing irritation. That tension leaks into your tone and facial expression. Even if your words are polite, your presence says, "I'm not okay with you right now." That contradiction creates more emotional instability, not less. Your presence also signals whether you are trying to understand or trying to win. When your body is leaned forward, your voice is clipped, and your eyes are scanning for an opening to respond, people feel interrogated, not heard. They don't experience you as a partner in the conversation. They experience you as a threat to their emotional safety. In that state, they will defend themselves, escalate, or shut down. No amount of logic can override that instinct. On the other hand, when your presence is slow, open, and grounded, people begin to regulate themselves automatically. A relaxed jaw, a softer gaze, slower movements, and steady breathing all send the message, there is no emergency here. That message allows the other person's nervous system to stand down. Once that happens, the thinking brain comes back online. Only then does logic become useful. This is why therapists, mediators, and emotionally intelligent leaders are effective even when they say very little. They change the emotional temperature of the room simply by how they show up. Their calm is not performative. It is embodied. People feel it. And when people feel safe, they become reasonable. They don't need to be forced into logic. They naturally return to it. Presence also determines whether your boundaries will be respected. You can state a boundary perfectly and still be ignored if your presence is uncertain, apologetic, or fearful. Conversely, you can state a boundary in very simple words and be taken seriously if your presence is steady and self-contained. People respond less to what you say and more to how settled you are within yourself when you say it. This is uncomfortable for people who rely on intellect as their primary form of control. Logic feels safer than vulnerability. Facts feel safer than emotional exposure. But emotional situations are not solved at the level of facts. They are stabilized at the level of nervous systems. You cannot out-argue a dysregulated person into calm. You can only out-regulate them with your presence. This doesn't mean logic is useless. It means logic is secondary. Logic works only after presence has done its job. Once safety is established, then clarity, reasoning, and solutions can emerge. Before that point, logic feels like pressure. It feels like dismissal. It feels like an attempt to override someone's emotional reality. Your presence also shapes your own experience of conflict. When you focus on winning arguments, you stay locked in your own survival mode. When you focus on grounding yourself, you step out of that mode. You stop taking emotional reactions personally. You stop needing immediate resolution. You become less reactive and more intentional. That shift alone changes the entire dynamic of the interaction. People remember less of what you said and more of how they felt with you. They remember whether you made them feel small or safe, rushed or respected, judged or understood. Long after the details of the argument fade, the emotional imprint of your presence remains. When you understand that your presence matters more than your logic, you stop trying to control conversations with words. You start leading them with your nervous system. You become the calm center that others unconsciously organize themselves around. And in that space, real communication finally becomes possible. Validation lowers intensity faster than advice, even though most people instinctively do the opposite. When someone is emotional, upset, or overwhelmed, our reflex is to fix it. We reach for solutions, explanations, or instructions because it makes us feel useful and in control. But in emotional moments, advice often feels like rejection disguised as help. It tells the other person, you shouldn't feel this way, even when that's not what we mean. And the moment someone feels dismissed or misunderstood, their emotions intensify instead of settling. When a person is upset, what they are really asking for is not a strategy. They are asking, do you see me? Do you understand me? Do I make sense to you right now? Validation answers those questions. Validation says, your reaction is human. Your feelings belong here. You're not crazy for feeling this way. That single message does more to calm a nervous system than any perfectly worded solution ever could. This is because emotions are not logical problems to be solved. They are biological states to be regulated. When someone feels threatened, hurt, embarrassed, or angry, their body is in survival mode. Their heart rate is elevated, their muscles are tight, and their thinking brain is partially offline. In that state, advice feels overwhelming, condescending, or irrelevant. Their nervous system cannot receive it yet. But validation speaks directly to the part of the brain that is scanning for danger. It says, you are safe here. You are not alone in this. Once that message lands, the body begins to relax. And only then does the brain reopen to perspective and problem solving. This is why phrases like, that makes sense, I can see why you'd feel that way, or that sounds really hard, are so powerful. They don't mean you agree with everything the person thinks or does. They mean you acknowledge their emotional reality. You are separating their feelings from their behavior. You are saying, your emotions are understandable, even if we still need to talk about what happened next. Most people skip validation because they're afraid it will encourage bad behavior or reinforce irrational thinking. But validation doesn't mean endorsement. It means recognition. You're not saying, you're right to explode at your boss. You are saying, I get why you felt overwhelmed and hurt in that moment. That distinction matters. People calm down when they feel understood, not when they feel corrected. Advice, when given too early, feels like pressure. It feels like being rushed out of your emotions instead of being met inside them. It sends the message, your feelings are inconvenient. Let's get past them. Even gentle advice can land as criticism when someone is dysregulated. That's why people often snap back with, I don't need advice right now. Or you're not listening to me. They're not rejecting your wisdom. They're rejecting the timing. Validation also restores a person's sense of dignity. Emotional intensity often comes with shame. People already feel embarrassed for being too sensitive or too much. When you jump straight to advice, you unintentionally reinforce that shame. You imply that something is wrong with how they're feeling. Validation does the opposite. It tells them they are still worthy of respect and care even in their messy emotional state. This is why children calm down faster when you name and accept their feelings instead of lecturing them. The same principle applies to adults. Saying, I can see you're really frustrated right now, will lower intensity faster than, you need to calm down and think logically. One builds safety, the other builds resistance. Validation also disarms defensiveness. When people feel heard, they stop needing to prove how upset they are. They don't have to raise their voice or repeat themselves. Their body no longer needs to fight for recognition. The volume naturally comes down because the emotional job has been done. Once validation has done its work, advice becomes welcome instead of intrusive. At that point, people often ask for it themselves. They say, what do you think I should do? That's your cue. Now their nervous system is regulated enough to hear you. Now your words can actually help. This approach also transforms your own emotional discipline. When you focus on validating instead of fixing, you stop trying to control outcomes. You become present instead of performative. You stop measuring your worth by how quickly you can solve someone else's pain. You become steadier, more patient, and more grounded. And that presence alone becomes part of the healing. Validation does not make problems disappear, but it changes the emotional climate in which those problems are addressed. It turns conflict into collaboration. It turns chaos into conversation. It turns intensity into trust. People don't need you to be their therapist. They need you to be their witness. They need you to sit with their feelings long enough for their body to settle. And when that happens, solutions stop feeling like commands and start feeling like support. So the next time someone is emotional, resist the urge to fix. Start by seeing them. Start by naming what you notice. Start by honoring their emotional reality. You will be surprised how quickly the storm passes when someone finally feels understood. Stability comes from grounded energy, not suppressed feelings. Even though most of us were taught the opposite, many people believe emotional strength means keeping everything inside, staying silent, and never letting anything show. They confuse control with repression and composure with numbness. But suppressed feelings don't disappear. They go underground. They build pressure. And eventually they leak out sideways through irritability, resentment, anxiety, exhaustion, or sudden emotional explosions that seem to come from nowhere. Real stability is not the absence of emotion. It is the ability to feel emotion without being hijacked by it. It is the capacity to stay present in your body while intense feelings move through you. Grounded energy means your nervous system is settled enough that you can experience anger without becoming cruel, sadness without collapsing, fear without panicking, and frustration without attacking. That kind of stability doesn't come from tightening your jaw and telling yourself to be fine. It comes from learning how to regulate your internal state instead of silencing it. Suppression is a survival strategy. Most people learned it in childhood. You learned that big emotions were inconvenient, unsafe, or unwelcome. Maybe you were told to stop crying. Maybe you were mocked for being sensitive. Maybe you learned that expressing anger led to punishment or abandonment. So your nervous system adapted. It learned to shut things down. It learned to disconnect from feeling in order to stay safe. That strategy worked back then. But as an adult, it becomes the very thing that destabilizes you. When you suppress feelings, your body stays in a low-grade stress response. You may look calm on the outside, but inside your system is braced. Your muscles are tight. Your breathing is shallow. Your thoughts are restless. You are constantly holding something back. That tension drains your energy and shortens your emotional fuse. Small things start to feel overwhelming. You become more reactive, not less. Grounded energy is different. Grounded energy comes from allowing emotions to exist without turning them into emergencies. It means noticing what you feel, naming it internally, and letting your body process it through breath, movement, or quiet presence. When you do that, the emotion runs its course. It rises, peaks, and falls. It doesn't get stuck. Your nervous system returns to baseline. You feel steadier, not heavier. This is why people who are deeply grounded can sit in intense conversations without losing themselves. They don't need to shut down or dominate. They don't need to prove anything. They are not fighting their internal state. They are allowing it. That inner permission creates outer calm. Their body is not in survival mode, so their mind stays clear. Suppressed feelings always come back for a second round. They resurface as passive aggression, emotional distance, chronic stress, or sudden outbursts that don't match the situation. That's why people who pride themselves on being low drama often end up creating the biggest explosions. The pressure finally exceeds their capacity to contain it. Grounded people feel deeply, but they don't drown in it. They let themselves be impacted without becoming reactive. They can say, "I'm really upset about this," without raising their voice. They can say, "That hurt me," without attacking. They can feel anger in their chest and still choose respectful words. That is emotional maturity. That is real composure. Grounded energy also changes how others experience you. People feel safe around someone who is emotionally present and regulated. They trust your responses. They don't walk on eggshells. They don't fear sudden mood shifts. Your steadiness becomes a stabilizing force for the entire room. Not because you suppress what you feel, but because you process it honestly and responsibly. This is why grounding practices matter more than positive thinking. Deep breathing, slow movement, body awareness, journaling, time in silence, and emotional labeling are not soft habits. They are nervous system training. They teach your body that it can handle emotional intensity without going into threat mode. Over time, your baseline state becomes calmer, more open, and more resilient. Grounded energy also makes your boundaries stronger. When you suppress feelings, you tolerate too much, you minimize your needs, you stay quiet to keep the peace. Then resentment builds. When you are grounded, you notice discomfort early. You address things before they become explosions. You speak up without shaking. You say no without guilt. You correct issues without cruelty. Stability is not rigidity. It is flexibility with structure. It is the ability to bend emotionally without breaking. It is knowing that feelings are temporary waves, not permanent identities. When you stop fighting your emotions and start regulating them, they lose their power to control you. The irony is that the more you allow yourself to feel, the calmer you become. The more you suppress, the more volatile your inner world gets. Suppression looks strong on the surface, but it is fragile underneath. Grounded energy looks soft on the surface, but it is unshakable underneath. You don't become stable by becoming numb. You become stable by becoming present. You become stable by building a relationship with your own nervous system. You become stable by letting emotions move through you instead of storing them inside you. That is real emotional control, not silence, not stiffness, not pretending you're unaffected, but the quiet confidence that comes from knowing you can feel anything and still remain yourself.